It was a dark and stormy night on the island of Sodor. The engines sat in their sheds, listening to the fierce wind and clapping of thunder echo above them. None of the mainline engines could sleep that night. The noise from outside kept them all awake. Percy had been shunting trucks in the yards at the big station before the storm hit, so he was ordered to stay with the big engines that night. There was a huge flash of lightning, which made poor Percy jump. Henry couldn't help but tease him.
"Be careful in the morning with it, Percy. We wouldn't want you falling off any quays or sinking in any floods again,"
Henry snickered, as did the other engines. "Be quiet," Percy snapped. "We all know you're the one who's afraid of rain, Henry." But Percy's remark was drowned by laughter. It was Gordon who spoke next, once he had recovered from chuckling.
"You know it, Percy. While I do congratulate you on getting your passengers home during the flood, a big engine like me wouldn't have been stopped. I'd be far taller than the water levels, and my fire would be unaffected. I certainly wouldn't have had to take my guards floorboards."
Another chorus of laughter below from the shed. Percy huffed and shut his eyes begrudgingly. The following morning, the engines were relieved to see the storm hadn't caused too much damage. While he was being steamed, an inspector came up to Percy's cab. "The Bodford and Sons power station on the Peel Godred line had a blackout during the storm. We need you to take a repair crew on the double," said the inspector. "Right away, mate," answered Percy's driver. "I don't understand why they send such a small engine for such an urgent job. Surely a big engine is more suited for an important rescue operation like this," huffed James. "You lot have your own trains to pull. Not to mention some of you will be too big for the branch. Percy is the ideal size for this job," remarked the inspector. The big engines grumbly watched as Percy set off for the power station. Percy hadn't ventured down the Peel Godred line before. He liked taking in all the new sights as he puffed along with his repair train. Soon they arrived at the power station. The men exited the coach and went inside to work. Percy yawned as he looked up at the early morning sky.
"Perhaps I could catch a few winks here,"
he said quietly as he closed his eyes. Suddenly, there was a whistle and the sound of small wheels whirring. Percy jumped and saw a little purple engine puffing alongside the power station with a line of coal trucks. "Morning," peeped the little engine as he rushed by. Percy was still very surprised and forgot to answer. A few minutes later, the engine puffed back and stopped by Percy. "Hello there. Sorry if I give you a fright. It's been rather hectic here. Blackouts cause a lot of problems, you see," the little engine smiled. "That's all right. My name is Percy. What's yours?" "Little Bodford's the name. Keeping Sodor shining is my game," chuckled little Bodford. Percy couldn't help but giggle too. "I've never seen you before. You're as small as the engines on the Scotland Railway," said Percy. "I may be small, but I have a very important job I'll have you know," said little Bodford sternly. "Without me, there'd be no coal for the power station, and then there'd be no power for the island." Percy was very impressed. "Where do you get your coal?" "There was a transfer yard further down my line. Once a month, a big engine like you brings a large shipment of coal, and it's loaded into my trucks. I bring them down here and keep the others in sidings for later." Percy blushed and smiled. Nobody had called him a big engine before. Then a whirring noise came from the power station, and it was soon up and running again. "Looks like we're back in business, which means I better get back to work," chuffed little Bodford. "I do hope I can see you again soon," said Percy, as the men climbed back into the coach. Little Bodford gave a friendly peep of his whistle as he set off down his little line. Percy whistled back as he puffed away. That night, Percy was stationed back in the mainline sheds as he'd be taking the post train later that night. "Well, little Percy, how did your rescue operation go? Didn't run into any back-end signals on Peel Godry, did you?" teased James. But Percy didn't answer. He just chuckled quietly to himself. "You know," Percy puffed, "next time you mainline engines look up at the lights in your shed, just remember there was a little engine out there who's working hard to make sure it stays on." The mainline engines didn't know what Percy meant. But we know better, don't we?